think? Alrighty. Alright, whenever folks are ready, you can kind of come on up here. I'll wait for folks to finish their business over there and gather them around.
I'm just grabbing the camera.
Gotcha.
Several lemons here.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Got our... Alright. Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Young, one of the leaders of the Washington State chapter of the Autistic Self Advocacy Network. Welcome. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here today, members, allies, friends, and families. Thank you. Today, the Autistic Self Advocacy Network, in cooperation with Not Dead Yet and the National Council on Independent Living, is holding vigils across the country in memory of people with disabilities who've lost their lives at the hands of those they depended upon the most to keep them safe, their families and caregivers. All over the country, our members have been gathering together today to honor the memories of those who have fallen. Here in Seattle, in grateful cooperation with the University of Washington's new D Center, and with the support of the Seattle Commission for People with Disabilities, we join our voices to this nationwide chorus, calling upon all who will hear us, not just to remember the lives that have been lost, but to honor and respect the dignity of these people. These people who are all too often reduced to faceless, nameless objects of pity and derision. We're here to demand that these people, these human beings, be remembered as people with rich, full, valuable lives, of no less worth than the lives of those who are considered by society to be more able of body or mind, those who are viewed as greater contributors to our communities, when those contributions are made possible by their privilege of access to and acceptance by mainstream society. Who knows what priceless, truly valuable contributions to our culture are lost due to the barriers to access that our marginalized population faces every day? Well, in the case of those whose memories we honor today, sadly, we will never be able to answer that question. So, why us? Why is the Autistic Self Advocacy Network holding vigils across the U.S. in memory of those murdered by their caregivers and families? I mean, aren't autistics supposed to be, I don't know, emotionless robots or something? Or maybe so hypersensitive and emotionally reactive that we ought to be a non-functional nervous wreck just thinking about these issues, let alone talking about them. Wait, talk? Autistics can talk? What's up with that? Well, setting aside the usual grossly misinformed stereotypes, the reality being that some of us can talk and some can't, some can talk or function socially in some situations but not in others, the truth of the matter is that we, like people with any other disabilities, do gather together in communities, do find ways to participate in society, and do speak out on issues that affect us all. When our conditions make it difficult or insurmountable to do so alone, we gather together with each other and with our allies and pool our strengths and resources to demand that our voices be heard and our concerns be taken seriously. In the case of these vigils, this all started about a year ago, on March 6th, 2012, when a 22-year-old autistic man, George Hodgins, in Sunnyvale, California, was shot and killed by his mother, who then took her own life as well. In the wake of this tragedy, much of the public discussion about George's death was focused on expressing sympathy for his killer, implying that the stress of living with and caring for a person with a disability should be accepted as a reasonable justification for murder. One of our members, Zoe Gross, organized a vigil to honor his memory and that of those who've lost their lives under similar circumstances. Inspired by her example, and spurred to action by continued offensive dialogue around such murders in the mainstream media, the Autistic Self Advocacy Network helped organize more of these vigils throughout the country. And on March 30th, 2012, 18 vigils were held across the U.S. demanding dignity and respect for those we had lost, and demanding that the inherent worth of the lives with people with disabilities be recognized and respected. On March 31st, 2012, a 4-year-old autistic boy named Daniel Corby was drowned in a bathtub by his mother. Clearly, there's more work to be done. So here we are, a year later, standing up for the lives and the dignity, the personhood of the fallen, and telling the world how we feel about these deaths and the way they're regarded. We are saddened by the senselessness of these deaths, and saddened by the loss of these lives, these people, and all that they could have brought to our communities, just by being the people they were. Saddened by the loss of the opportunity to get to know these people, our brothers and sisters. Saddened that thanks to the nature of media coverage, we know more about their deaths than about their lives. Saddened that we don't have more to say about them as individuals today, and that we're reduced to speaking out about the injustices around their tragic deaths. We're hurt by the conversations we see and hear over and over again that revolve around expressing sympathy for those who have killed people like us. Hurt by the way these acts of murder are portrayed as understandable, justifiable, in light of the challenges of caring for someone with a disability. Hurt by the implicit assumptions that these lives had little value and were unlikely to have contributed meaningfully to society. Hurt by what this says about the value society places on our own lives and contributions. Hurt by the way that society so clearly sees us as less than whole people. We are angry that people are so quick to make excuses for those who murder people like us. Angry about the way that these excuses perpetuate the social narrative that our lives have less value, that our very existence is an intolerable burden to those close to us, and that extreme violence against us is therefore justified. Angry at the way that this narrative leads to countless abuses and acts of aggression against us, small and large, every single day as we make our way through this world. Angry at the way that those who murder our brothers and sisters so often, not always, but often, receive greatly reduced sentences as a direct result of this poisonous cultural narrative. Angry that the criminal justice system so often seems to agree that murdering one of us is justified. We are afraid of what this means for our own physical safety and that of others like us. Afraid that the excuses made for these murderers will lead other beleaguered caregivers to believe that if the stress of their duties becomes too much for them, society will forgive them for killing those under their care. Afraid that they will be right to believe this. Afraid that we will be attacked or killed just for being the people we are. Afraid that people will think that's okay. We are determined to do everything we can to protect those of us who are still here. Determined to change the way people talk about our lives and about our deaths. Determined to change the way people think about the value of our lives. Determined to do everything we can to prevent as many future murders as possible. Determined to make it unacceptable to discuss our deaths as understandable or justifiable by reason of our disabilities. Determined that this time, for once, it's our turn to make the rules about what is or is not socially acceptable. So, with all that in mind, it's time for us to pay tribute to the ones whose lives we're here to honor. I have a list of names here of people we've lost at the hands of their caregivers and families. This list is incomplete. In addition to these names, we mourn today for countless others in our community who died at the hands of those who were supposed to care for them and whose names we may never know. Tracy Latimer, 12 years old, gassed by her father, 1993, Wilkie, Saskatchewan. Robert Latimer served 7 years in prison for second-degree murder. Charles Antoine Blais, 6 years old, drowned by his mother, November 1996, Montreal. Danielle Blais pled guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to live in a halfway house for 1 year. She was then hired as a spokesperson for Montreal's Autism Society. Pierre Pasquier, 10 years old, pushed into the sea by his mother, 1998. Saint-Brieuc, France. Anne Pasquier was given a 3-year suspended sentence and served no jail time. Daniel Lubner, age 13, burned alive by his mother, September 1999, Cayuga County, New York. Michelle Davis was sentenced to 6 years in prison for manslaughter and arson. James Joseph Cummings Jr., age 46, stabbed to death by his father in the institution where he lived, November 1999, Red Bank, New Jersey. Mr. Cummings Sr. was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Gabriel Britt, 6 years old, suffocated by his father, March 2001, Somerville, South Carolina. Terrence Britt served 4 years in prison for unlawful conduct toward a child. Johnny Churchy, 13 years old, strangled by his mother, 2001, Hamilton, Ontario. Jadwiga Miskiewicz was sentenced to time in a psychiatric hospital for killing her son. Angelica Oriema, 20 years old, drowned by her mother, who first tried to electrocute her to death. December 2003, Brooklyn, New York. Joanna Oriema served 3 years in prison for killing her daughter. Scarlett Chen, 4 years old, drowned by her mother, July 2004, Toronto. Xuan Peng, her mother, pled guilty to manslaughter, but was released after 30 months in prison. At the time of her release, the court ruled that she doesn't represent a threat to children. Tiffany Pinkney, 23 years old, locked in basement and starved to death by her sister and brother-in-law, 2005, Mississauga, Ontario. Allison Cox was sentenced to 9 years in prison for manslaughter. Orlando Class was sentenced to 2 years house arrest for criminal negligence. Ryan Davies, 12 years old, pushed off a bridge by his mother in a murder-suicide, April 2006, Romilly, United Kingdom. Christopher DeGroot, 19 years old, died of severe burns after he was locked in his parents' apartment alone during a fire, May 2006, Albany, Oregon. Police suspected that Agnes and Nicolas DeGroot deliberately set the fire, but the court allowed a plea deal and sentenced them to 6 months in jail for criminally negligent homicide. Katie McCarran, 3 years old, suffocated by her mother, May 2006, Portland, Illinois. Karen McCarran was sentenced to 36 years in prison for first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and concealing a homicidal death. William Lash III, 12 years old, shot by his father in a murder-suicide, July 2006, McLean, Virginia. Lakeisha Victor, 10 years old, starved by her mother, August 2006, Hinckley, Minnesota. Ledusky Sue Hotchkiss was sentenced to 32 months in prison, followed by 16 months of supervised release for second-degree manslaughter. Marcus Feisel, age 4, wrapped in heavy blankets by his foster parents and left in a closet to suffocate while they went out of town, August 2006, Union Township, Clement County, Ohio. Liz Carroll, the foster mother, was sentenced to 54 years to life for murder, involuntary manslaughter, kidnapping, felonious assault, and endangering children. David Carroll accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 16 years to life for murder and gross abuse of a corpse. Ulysses Stable, 12 years old, throat slit by his father, November 2006, the Bronx, New York. Jose Stable was charged with second-degree murder. Krista Reamer, age 47, thrown from a balcony by her husband, Kansas City, Missouri, August 2007. Stanley Reamer was sentenced to life in prison, but will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. Jared Greenwood, age 26, died of infected bed sores after being left in place and neglected by his mother, Bloomfield, New Mexico. Sandra Greenwood was sentenced to serve 2.5 years in prison for second-degree neglect, September 2007. Francesca Hardwick, age 18, locked in a burning car with her mother in a murder-suicide, October 2007, Barwell, Leicestershire, United Kingdom. Naomi Hill, age 4, drowned by her mother, November 2007, Connors Key, Flintshire, United Kingdom. Joanne Hill was sentenced to life in prison, but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Shaleigh Ward, age 7, starved and neglected by her parents, November 2007, Hawk's Nest, New South Wales, Australia. Sharon Ward was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Shaleigh's murder. Blakely Ward was sentenced to 16 years in prison for manslaughter. Maxwell Eyre, age 2, beaten to death by his father, December 2007, Alton, Missouri. Johnny Garcia, Maxwell's father, was sentenced to 44 years in prison for first-degree murder. Maxwell's mother and Garcia's girlfriend both received 5-year sentences for child endangerment, as they knew that Maxwell was in critical condition but did not go and get help. Callista Springer, age 16, chained to a bed and abandoned in a fire by her entire family, February 2008, Centerville, Michigan. Anthony and Marcia Springer were convicted of torture and first-degree child abuse. Marcia was sentenced to 18 years and 9 months, up to 50 years in prison for torture, and 95 months to 15 years for child abuse. Anthony was sentenced to 25 to 50 years for torture and 10 to 15 years for child abuse. Courtney Wise, age 17, starved to death by her mother, February 2008, St. Catharines, Ontario. Astrid Hewler was sentenced to 6 years in prison for manslaughter. The sentence includes pretrial custody, so after the verdict, she faced an additional 5 years in prison. Ethan Scott Kirby, age 3, beaten to death by his mother's boyfriend, August 2008, Conroe, Texas. Chase Cannon was sentenced to 50 years in prison for murder and will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. Tom Inglis, age 22, died after his mother administered an overdose of heroin to him, November 2008, Dagenham, Essex, United Kingdom. Francis Inglis was sentenced to life in prison for murder and must serve a minimum of 9 years. Christian Clay Jenkins, age 14, given an overdose of oxycodone by his father, November 2008, Oak Hill, West Virginia. Henry Clay Jenkins was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole for first-degree murder and child neglect resulting in death. However, the judge made a mercy recommendation, meaning Jenkins will be eligible for parole after serving 18 years. Lexi Agyapong Glover, age 13, left in a frigid creek by her mother and died of drowning and exposure, January 2009, Manassas, Virginia. Alfreda Gregg Glover was sentenced to 26 years in prison for felony murder, felony child abuse, and filing a false police report. Jeremy Fraser, 9 years old, died of recurrent leukemia after his mother withheld the medication that would have saved his life, March 2009, Salem, Massachusetts. Kristen Labrie was convicted of attempted murder, child endangerment, and 2 counts of assault and battery. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Shailia Miza Thomas, 9 years old, starved to death by her aunt, who then hid her body in order to continue to collect money she received for Shailia's care. March 2009, Flint, Michigan. Lori Thomas was sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison and a fine of $11,538 for involuntary manslaughter, tampering with evidence, child abuse, and welfare fraud. Pamela Camille Hall, age 59, stabbed by her son-in-law, April 2009, Bassett, Virginia. James Miller was sentenced to life in prison. Lloyd Yarborough, age 62, fed an overdose of prescription medication through his feeding tube by his wife, May 2009, Austin, Texas. Catherine Yarborough was sentenced to 10 years probation for injury to a disabled individual. Peter Eitzen, age 16, stabbed by his mother, July 2009, Blackiston, Australia. Beverly Ellen Eitzen was charged with murder, but was acquitted because the judge found that she had been suffering a major depressive episode at the time of the murder. Jeremy Bostic, age 11, gassed by his father in a murder-suicide. Edmonton, Alberta, September 2009. Tony Kaur, age 15, strangled by his mother, October 2009, Mississauga, Ontario. Xiao Chang-sin was charged with murder, but the case has not yet gone to trial. Betty Ann Gagnon, age 48, tortured to death by her sister and brother-in-law, November 2009, Edmonton, Alberta. Her sister and brother-in-law were charged with unlawful confinement, manslaughter, and assault. Walter Knox Hildebrand Jr. Years old, died of a seizure induced by his brother's physical abuse, November 2009. Willows, California. Stuart Allen Hildebrand was arrested on suspicion of assault with a deadly weapon, causing pain, suffering, or injury to an elder or dependent adult. Laura Cummings, age 23, raped and tortured to death by her mother and brother, January 2010. North Collins, New York. Eva and Luke Wright Cummings were charged with second-degree murder, predatory sexual assault, unlawful imprisonment as a hate crime, and endangering a disabled person's welfare. Jude Mira, age 8, forced by his mother to overdose on prescription medications, February 2010, New York, New York. Gigi Jordan has been charged with second-degree murder. Ajit Singh, age 12, forced by his mother to drink bleach, February 2010, London, United Kingdom. Satpal Kaur Singh pled guilty to manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility. Darren Iskrig, 6 years old, died of exposure after his grandmother abandoned him in a remote area, Wiley, Texas, April 2010. Darlene Phillips was sentenced to 28 years in prison for murder, but will be eligible for parole after having served 12 years. Leosha Barnett, age 17, starved to death by her mother and sister, May 2010, Fort Worth, Texas. Kaireshi Stevenson, Leosha's sister, was sentenced to 5 years in prison for injury to a child. Tasca Johnson, their mother, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for injury to a child. Glenn Freeney, age 11, strangled by his mother, May 2010, Cardiff, Wales. Yvonne Freeney was acquitted of murder, but admitted to manslaughter by diminished responsibility and was allowed to walk free. Peyton Ettinger, age 4, starved by his mother, May 2010, Greensburg, Indiana. Courtney Ettinger Tressler was sentenced to 10 years in prison for neglect. Christopher Melton, age 18, gasped by his mother in a murder-suicide, June 2010, Columbia, Maryland. Rylan Rochester, 6 months old, suffocated by his mother because she believed him to be autistic, June 2010, Superior, Colorado. Stephanie Rochester was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to an institution. Kenneth Holmes, age 12, shot by his mother in a murder-suicide, July 2010, the Bronx, New York. Zain Akhtar, age 5, and Faryal Akhtar, age 2, strangled by their mother, July 2010, Dallas, Texas. Saika Akhtar has been charged on 2 counts of capital murder. Emily Bell Malin, age 85, hit and run over with a car by her son, Darbyboro, Pennsylvania, August 2010. Stephen Frederick Malin was sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder. Rohit Singh, age 7, beaten to death by his father, September 2010, Bathinda, India. Gurmeet Singh was charged with murder. Zara Baker, age 10, murdered and dismembered by her stepmother and perhaps her father, October 2010. Hickory, North Carolina. Elisa Baker was sentenced to a maximum of 18 years in prison for second-degree murder. Adam Baker was voluntarily deported to his native country, Australia. Chase Ogden, age 13. Chase and his sister Olivia were shot by his mother in a murder-suicide. Colorado Springs, Colorado, October 2010. Karandeep Arora, age 18, suffocated by his parents, October 2010. Sarita Vihar, India. Parents then committed suicide. Chad Jackson, age 25, starved and neglected by his mother, July 2011. Grand Junction, Michigan. Yodi Jackson is charged with second-degree murder and second-degree felonious abuse. Julie Cirella, age 8, poisoned by her mother, July 2011, Long Island, New York. Veronica Cirella is charged with murder. Noe Medina Jr., 7 months old, thrown 4 stories by his mother, August 2011, La Habra, California. His mother, Sonia Rocio, is charged with murder. Benjamin Barnard, age 13, shot by his mother in a murder-suicide, August 2011, Kensington, Maryland. Jory Lorette, age 7, decapitated by his father, August 2011, Thibodaux, Louisiana. Jeremiah Lee Wright, Jory's father, was found unfit for trial and sent to an institution. George Hodgins, age 22, shot by his mother in a murder-suicide, March 2012, Sunnyvale, California. Daniel Corby, age 4, drowned by his mother, March 2012, San Diego, California. Patricia Corby was sentenced to 15 years to life for second-degree murder. Melissa Stoddard, age 11, suffocated in restraints that her father and stepmother routinely used. December 2012, Sarasota, Florida. Both were charged with aggravated child abuse with great bodily harm. Well, that's quite a list. And who knows how many more similar deaths have gone unreported in that same time period. But each of these murder victims, whether we know about them or not, and regardless of their age, level of development, or their particular disability, was a whole, complete person whose life had just as much value as any other, and just as much richness of experience. Please join me now in taking a moment of silence to absorb the profound weight of all these lives cut short, and to reflect on who these people might have been, the lives they might have lived, and the joys they might have found if given the chance. Thank you. I think we all needed that moment of silence in light of the heavy emotions that have been brought up by all of this. But ultimately, today isn't about silence. Our voices have been silenced for far too long. We're faced with people who want to silence us, who can't bear to hear our message every single day. And those we've lost to murder have been silenced forever. Today, we honor their memories by making sure our voices are heard. Today, here and now, it's time to get loud. So, do you have anything you want to say? Anything you want to tell the world about why we've gathered here today? Now's your time to be listened to. Now's your time to be heard. Anyone? You have a phone? Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Lee.
So this is my poem, untitled. How many silent screams will it take you to remember the histories of our peoples buried under years of silent denial, and systems that categorize people by price tags? Who is more valuable? Whose lives do we consider worth living? As the cruel clang of capitalism continues, the most silenced and excluded, as years of isolation weigh heavily on chests like stone, we must look beyond this cracked mirror of paradise lies. Redefine value as a birthright, light human hearts like bright lanterns. As we struggle into the night, remembrance, resistance, with love as a power much stronger than hate. Ignite flames, illuminating lives unseen, as we continue to grieve and fight and let our fiery hearts fuel our journeys.
Anyone else? I don't blame you. This has been pretty intense. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today and helping make this such a powerful evening. Tonight, we've had our voices heard, and we've let it known that we will not be silenced, and that we certainly will not allow our lives to be diminished by allowing our deaths to be portrayed as understandable or acceptable. If there's one thing I want observers to take away from all of this, is that it is no longer acceptable to report our deaths from a purely non-disabled perspective. The disability community must have a strong voice in such stories and in every story about us. We must be included. We will be heard. After all, what's the motto of the Autistic Self Advocacy Network? Nothing about us without us. Nothing about us without us. Nothing about us without us.